watching Business Incorporated live on Channels Television. Coming up in the next 25 minutes. FinTech Week 2023 opens in Lagos, bringing together more than 10,000 financial and FinTech stakeholders. And Zimbabwe gets a new World Bank country manager. Plus, Central Bank of Egypt eases export rules for gold artifacts. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Ladi Williams. First off, let's get a check on the markets. Starting on the African continent, there we'll see the EGX and the NGX there in different positions right there. Nigeria's NGX index there 0.17% up, 66,993 points, looking quite formidable to finish the day, actually up. Yesterday we had a bullish, a bearish close actually, but now we're seeing some buying interest right there at intraday. South Africa's index was down 0.2. It's actually up 0.21%. Other markets we track, we see the EGX that's had an incredible session so far, seen about 2%, 3% gains last week into this week, but we're seeing a big pullback there at intraday, 1.75%. Wonder if they're going to be able to flip that before the close of trade right there in Egypt. And we see the Kenya index there closing down 0.71% yesterday. Let's get a check on the Middle East now. We see Middle Eastern markets quite mixed today. We're seeing the UAE is more of positive sentiment, 0.05% up. That's for the Abu Dhabi index. Dubai index is up 0.54%. With other markets we track in that area there, we see Saudi index they're down 0.11%, and the Qatari index, biggest move down intraday, down 2.27%. Quite a big drop there for the Qatari index. Let's get a check on the UK now. We have our correspondent right there, Juliana, standing by. Great to have you, Juliana. So we see more than 460,000 people across the UK will see their real living wage rise by about 10% amid the ongoing cost of living crisis. I guess that's good news.
It is good news. Good afternoon, Laddie. However, this is voluntary. Although we have over 14,000 firms, including the likes of Aviva and KPMG, who have signed up to this voluntary real living wage. Again, the emphasis is on the term voluntary, and I believe that the Roundtree Foundation, who oversee this living wage, have given companies 6 months to implement it. However, you know, if you are a good firm, you would have implemented it today. Now, if you were living outside London, this real living wage will rise to about £12 per hour. If you live in the capital, which we know is incredibly expensive, it rises to £13.50. And as I say, the Roundtree Foundation have done this purely because we are going through this cost of living crisis. We have been going through it since the beginning of the pandemic. Lots of the buffers that the then Chancellor Rishi Sunak put in place are not available for people now, and we are going into an incredibly cold winter. So any sort of support that you can get is good, particularly if you are a worker. Getting a decent buck for the amount of service you put in is really important. So this has been welcomed, unsurprisingly, by unions across the board, and in fact they've gone a bit further and they want Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, to try and do something for the national minimum wage, which of course isn't voluntary. That's law and something that all employers across the UK must adhere to.
Yeah, I guess workers will take any increase right now. We need more to add to what you're getting at this time. But it's earnings season.
I agree.
Yeah, it's earnings season right now. We see Barclays there, the profit forecast. The bank reported a net profit about £1.27 billion. Good money, but there's some fears with that too.
Yeah, there are fears, and you're right, we are bang in the middle of profit season for the end of Q3, and Barclays, which is a FTSE 100 lender based in the UK, they've updated investors this morning, but despite the fact that, they beat forecasts estimate, their share price in London is down 7%, and that's because there are a series of issues that they are facing with, primarily coming from their trading division, which missed estimates. And according to bosses, this is due to the competitive environment for UK retail deposits. The trading division has been underperforming for several quarters now, so Barclays have said to investors this morning that there is going to be some sort of restructuring. Now, we've seen this from big firms throughout the year, lots of cost-cutting, middle management positions going. That's what we're expecting to come following Barclays' announcement. Also, as well, they've had to set aside a £433 million impairment payment. Now, what that is if banks don't think they're going to get loans back, they're obviously going to take a hit for that. So £500 million is quite a lot, which took off some of the amount that they were posting in their pre-tax profits, which did come in at £1.93 billion. So it did dip slightly from quarter to quarter, but as you said at the top, better than estimates forecast.
Yeah, better than estimates, definitely. But how are the markets reacting to the earnings so far?
Not great, actually, because we also had PMI data, which we didn't discuss. The PMI data every month has a forensic look at what's happening in the UK economy, and there are fears. There have been fears for a couple of years, but I think the fear is increasing that perhaps the UK economy is teetering on a recession. Services, manufacturing, construction, all down, which has led into the markets. The FTSE All-Share in intraday, Laddie, it's down 0.16%. FTSE 100 also down by 0.11%, and the domestic market, the FTSE 250, down at 0.36%. In the currencies market, the British pound also down, trading down against the US dollar by 0.19%. but trading up against the euro by 0.15%, but down against the Japanese yen by 0.22% at intraday.
Right, I guess red is the color right there. Thank you so much, Juliana, for the update.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at what's happening in Europe now. The European Union is warning social media platform X that if it wants to stay in the EU, it'll have to continue doing good business in the region. This comes as graphic and allegedly illegal content spreads on the platform formerly known as Twitter, and reports emerge and then are denied that X may pull out of Europe. For more on this now, joining me from Brussels, Cassandra Sunt, right there in Berlin. Great to have you, Cassandra. So what's the latest on the issue here?
Thanks for having me, Lottie. Well, to set the scene here, the social media platform X, which was bought by Elon Musk last year, is used by over 101 million Europeans within the bloc. And under a new law called the Digital Services Act, there are certain obligations that particularly big tech companies have to meet. There were reports last week that these obligations in the European Union were resulting in Musk considering pulling out of the region. But Musk has denied these reports, calling them, quote, utterly false. But this reported frustration definitely goes both ways. The European Union's digital chief recently told reporters, quote, with Mr. Musk, the dialogue doesn't go very well.
You mentioned this law and its efforts to regulate big tech in Europe. The EU is probing whether X has violated the Digital Services Act, particularly in light of the Israel-Hamas war. Can you tell us more?
That's right. So one important component of the DSA is that it obliges large online platforms to take consistent and swift action against hate speech. And this probe from the European Commission right now means essentially they want to know more about how X, this very large social media platform, is meeting these obligations. That's because there's evidence that calls for violence and misinformation were spreading on X after the attack on Israel by Hamas, which both the EU and Germany consider a terrorist organization. X has been allegedly swamped with graphic images, including fake information and terrorist propaganda. The commission will decide after October 31st whether to open formal proceedings. This kind of request is a preliminary step to launch a formal probe, but all of that is to say that this could lead to fines being imposed on the social media company, and those monetary penalties could actually total up to 6% of a company's global revenue. So if it happens, it will be the first time the European Union executive has taken this step.
All right, turning to the markets now, what investors in Europe seen so far today?
Well, the UK's FTSE 100 index opened almost flat today. That follows a flat day yesterday as gains in mining stocks tracking metal prices higher offset the drag from Barclays shares. That company put out lackluster quarterly results. Meanwhile, data showed Britain's unemployment rate held steady at 4.2% in the 3 months to August. But the big picture there remains a softening labor market, with the number of people in jobs falling again. That's a sign that the Bank of England might decide to pause rates at its upcoming meeting. In the Eurozone, the Frankfurt DAX index edged up slightly while the Paris CAC 40 rose 0.2%. And of course, here in the EU, many are waiting for Thursday's European Central Bank decision on whether to raise rates here once again.
All right, all eyes on rates. Now, thank you so much, Cassandra Sunt, right there in Berlin. Thank you. All right, now, let's take a look at what's happening in Asia now. See, Asia-Pacific markets rebounded and raised earlier losses as investors assess private surveys of business activity from Japan and Australia, as well as the October producer price index from South Korea. In Australia, the S&P ASX 200 gained about 0.19%. We see right there the Nikkei that closed up 0.20%, while the Kospi 1.12% up. HSI index down though 1.05%. Other markets we track in Asia there, we see the Shanghai Composite up 0.78%, 2,962 points, while the ASX 200 6,856 points, up 0.19%. Let's get a check on the futures market now in the U.S. The U.S. stock futures rose as investors focus on a fresh slate of earning reports, and traders are monitoring the latest moves in the Treasury yield. We see futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average there added 145 points, up 0.34%, 33,181 points. The S&P 500 futures is up 0.45%, but a bigger mover with tech-heavy Nasdaq there, up 0.55%. We see General Motors shares rose more than 1% in the pre-market on the back of better than expected third-quarter results. However, the company's full-year outlook shows rising costs due to United Auto Workers union strikes weighing on further gains there. Let's get a check on the oil market now. See, oil prices rose today, recovering some of the previous day's losses as investors remain nervous that the Israel-Hamas war could escalate into a wider conflict in the oil-exporting region, causing potential supply disruptions. Brent crude futures climbed 70 cents, about 0.8% to $90.53 a barrel, while U.S. WTI crude futures, that rose about 71 cents, about 0.8% to $86.20 a barrel. We see gold prices there. Get a check on the metals market. See the oil market there recovering better today. For the gold market, we see gold prices rebounded today as benchmark U.S. Treasury yields pulled back while investors awaited economic data for guidance on interest rates and monitored growing tensions in the Middle East. We see spot gold up 0.2% at $1,976.99 per ounce, while U.S. gold futures, that was steady at $1,988.10. A benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury yield declined after briefly rising about 5%. That was yesterday, and further threatening an economic slowdown on higher borrowing costs. All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, commodities market update is next. Do stay with us. Welcome Welcome back. Let's get a check on the commodities market now. See, the Economist Intelligence Unit has revised its 2023 price projection for aluminium downwards by 4.95% to an average of $2,360 per ton. The global price of aluminium has also declined by about 7% year-to-date to $2,181 per ton. Joining us now for this conversation is Miriam Ode, analyst at FDC. Great to have you on the show, Miriam.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So what is the reason behind this price decline, and is this trend expected to persist in 2024?
Like you said, the global price of aluminium has been declining currently, mainly due to slowing economic growth globally, and also because of the constant appreciation of the dollar against a basket of currencies. Now, like we all know, aluminium is actually traded in dollar, meaning that the appreciation of dollar in the market would make the commodity automatically more expensive without even a necessary increase in the price of the commodity. So what does this mean for the demand for of the commodity? Demand is most likely going to move in the opposite direction. That means demand is going to fall, and this will weigh on the global price of aluminium in the near term. And this even what we're seeing already. And we don't expect this trend to persist in 2024. Already just last month, we saw aluminium prices climb to a 5-month high of $2,300 per ton because of the drought in China's hydroelectric producing region. This is important because China is the world's largest producer of aluminium, and a drop in its supply means a loss for the global economy, and it will definitely affect aluminium prices. And that's why we saw aluminium prices last month increase to that level. Also, China, interestingly, is still the world's largest consumer of the commodity, and we're seeing a surge in its green sector. That's an increase in the demand for solar energy, and resultantly an increase in the demand for solar panels, which aluminium is used to produce. So these factors would actually influence aluminium prices in 2024 and result in a more bullish outlook for the commodity during this review period.
All right, you see, China always the biggest consumer of most commodities, but aluminium is the second most consumed industrial metal, but despite the ever-increasing demand, there's not been a corresponding increase in the production of aluminium. What is the reason for this?
Okay, yes, I think to answer this question, I need to point out the fact that aluminium is actually a mined commodity, meaning that it requires high level of power or high level of energy to be produced or even to be extracted in its form of bauxite, because it's extracted from the ground as bauxite. And this at a time when energy prices, you would agree with me, at a time when energy prices are at a high level, it is not unlikely to see that producers are shying away from increasing their production levels, because oil prices is already at $90 per barrel. Fuel prices, domestic fuel prices, is tending towards 600 naira per liter. And let's not forget that aluminium is actually highly recyclable, meaning that it can be easily recycled. And the level of energy needed for recycling is only 5% of what's needed for production. So it's not strange to see that producers of aluminium would rather recycle aluminium or opt for recycling than to increase their output level. And this is why we're seeing that despite the fact that aluminium is actually, the demand for aluminium is increasing day by day, the output level still remains relatively constant.
Right, but let's look at some data now from International Aluminium Institute. It shows that Africa produces about 130,000 tons annually, with South Africa being the largest producer. What is South Africa doing, differently, and in what ways can Nigeria improve its efficiency in aluminium production?
So let me point out that South Africa is Africa's largest producer of aluminium, and it has reached this level simply because it has taken great strides in encouraging or stimulating its local demand for the commodity, and in turn this resulted in an increase in production levels as producers were striving to meet up with the rising demand. Also, South Africa is the largest, so has the largest solar energy capacity in Africa, and it has definitely capitalized on this fact. Like I said before, aluminium is used in production of solar panels, and the country has also taken and made great efforts in expanding its already existing secondary aluminium smelters, which are used in the recycling of aluminium. And Nigeria can actually learn from this, because currently we only have one functioning secondary aluminium smelter that has not even been in use for the past decade. So the restart of this aluminium smelter, secondary aluminium smelter, and also consequent plans into building or creating more secondary aluminium smelters can increase Nigeria's aluminium production, as well as the attractiveness of Nigeria's aluminium production or output in the global market.
All right, I guess the price reduction should be a positive for builders and construction producers there. Thank you so much, Miriam Ode, analyst, Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel.
All right, let's take a look at some stories now. See, Nigeria's FinTech Week 2023. It's open in Lagos, bringing together more than 10,000 financial and fintech stakeholders and leaders from over 80 countries. The meeting will be a three-day meeting with the theme FinTech, Resilience, Innovation, and Diversification. To dissect this, participants can expect a lineup of events, conversations, including keynote sessions from industry leaders, interactive panel debates, hand-on workshops, and numerous networking opportunities. The event is publicized with NFW23 hashtag to create a dynamic avenue where traditional financial institutions, innovative fintech startups, government representatives, and global investors convert to shape the future of finance in one of Africa's most vibrant tech hubs. And to Southern Africa now, Anita Fernandez has begun her reign as the new World Bank's country manager to Zimbabwe with a mandate to spearhead its operational programs and engagement in areas clearance and debt resolution efforts. The Brazilian national will also sustain and grow a constructive dialogue with the government and work alongside stakeholders and partners to coordinate action and catalyze change. Fernandez replaces Majori Mpundu, who is now the chief counsel in the World Bank's legal vice presidency covering Africa. And Fernandez was previously resident representative for Cabo Verde, where she played a pivotal role at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and the expanding footprint of the World Bank support to the island country. Fernandez's appointment comes as Zimbabwe's re-engaging creditors to extinguish total public debt estimated to be over $20 billion, with Zimbabwe owing the World Bank $1.5 billion. Let's take it to North Africa now, where the Central Bank of Egypt revised the deadline for transferring the export proceeds of gold artifacts to banks from 7 days to 30 days. Accordingly, banks in Egypt should disclose the details of clients who fail to transfer the proceeds of the gold artifacts exported from the Egyptian market within 30 days of the shipment date. Egypt's gold production amounts to about 15.8 tons per year, most of which comes from Sukari mine in the eastern desert. Now the country's gold exports have grown by 45% to reach $1.63 billion in 2022, up from $1.126 billion in 2021. And the Africa Development Bank loan to Kenya has grown 37.2% in the last 5 years to cross the $500 billion shilling mark, deepening the Pan-African lender's role in the country's development agenda. Treasury Cabinet Secretary of the AFDB's loan portfolio to Kenya hit about 584.9 billion Kenyan shillings, and the end of last month from 290.3 billion Kenyan shillings as of September 2018. The jump in loans dispersed has made AFDB a major financier of Kenya's infrastructure projects, as well as the private sector, closing in on the bank, the ranks of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund as some of Kenya's biggest creditors. All right, those are the biggest stories right here in Africa, and that's how your money's performing at intraday right here on the African continent and major markets we track around the world. Maybe you can watch this again on our YouTube channel. Just flip over to YouTube, search for Channels Television. You can also visit our website, www.channelstv.com. For me and the team right here at Lagos HQ, it's bye for now.